Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive, and welcome to a new series that I've entitled HR Challenges Faced by SMEs. And I'll be talking to a number of HR professionals over the next couple of weeks that are going to provide you with insights and pragmatic solutions to really help you with HR challenges you may be facing right now. And today, I do have the great pleasure of Lucy Fitzgerald. Good to meet you. Good afternoon, Lucy.
Good afternoon, Julian. Thank you very much for inviting me today to chat with you.
Yep, pleased to see you. And I know you're recovering from that horrible thing called COVID, and I'm glad you're here today. So that's great. So you are the CEO and founder of Fitzgerald HR, a full-service HR consultancy helping employers to recruit, manage, develop, and retain great people. And you've got over 20 years of experience in all areas of HR, including strategic planning and troubleshooting, employment law, talent management, coaching, and advising. And today we're going to be exploring why leaders or business owners should care about their people. It sounds a real obvious thing to think about, but it's a thing to really grapple with that. But before we go into that conversation, I want to ask you, what do you love about what you do, Lucy?
Because I mean, technically I do two things. I do HR and deliver HR to clients and companies who work with us. And then I also run my own business. So I'm very lucky because I've got the two things that I do and I love both of them. Mostly I just love the variety. I really, really like to be challenged, and as anyone who runs a business will know, it's very challenging. You're always having to learn and figure out something new. And I like that. I get bored quite easily. So it's great for me to be very challenged. And I like to feel like I make a difference. And I feel that me, my company, our employees, we all make a difference for our clients in terms of helping them to resolve their people issues, grow and get bigger through their people, and just generally have a better working life as a result of having someone that they can turn to help them with their sort of day-to-day people challenges.
So your job and your passion is all about people, and
yes.
That's what you like doing, and it's great to meet people who love what they do and they love running their own business, because there's a lot of challenges that come with that as well. But you love it. I just want to just focus a little bit on, I guess, this whole topic of well-being, mental health that's been surfacing over the last couple of years in light of not just COVID. I think it's been out there well before that as well as a challenge. And there was a survey done by a company called Breathe, it's like a HR software sort of provider, that said that 68% of business owners have seen an increase in the last 18 months of sort of mental health and challenges with anxiety, depression, all sorts in our workplace. I'd just be intrigued to know from your experience with your clients, what have you noticed in the last sort of couple of years in the context of that?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. I think that well-being has always been on the agenda of larger businesses, and we do lots of work with larger businesses, and we see well-being being something that has been of great importance for a long time. But with the SMEs, less so, and I think that's largely just because as an SME, there's so many pressing priorities, and a lot of the time those priorities are around finance, money, cash flow, getting the business in, getting the work delivered. And so there's less capacity or resources to think about employee well-being. But in the last couple of years, I think that's really changed. So we've seen a real difference in, one, the type of work that new clients want us to do. So them sort of joining us with employee well-being right at the top of their agenda. How do we, what do we want our culture to look like, and how do we build well-being into that culture? And then similarly, the clients who we've been working with for a really long time, not to say they haven't cared about well-being, but it's not necessarily been a pressing priority. And now it's become so, because COVID has obviously changed the way that we work. Lots of employers are now working, they perhaps have hybrid workforces, or people working from home all the time. They're not seeing each other as often. So that changes the sort of well-being dynamic for employees, and not necessarily that sort of sense of being a manager. Somebody pops in the morning, they're talking about how they're feeling, or how something, they may have had an argument with their husband right before they came to work or something like that. Getting this general sense of people's personal lives and how things are going. Whereas when they're working from home, they're completely remote. You're coming onto a Teams meet. There's not necessarily that chit chat that helps us to gauge how people are feeling. Obviously, there's the just general anxiety that is created by the media and all of the stuff around us, and genuine concerns about health and how we may be impacted, and people wearing masks when they didn't used to, and all of those things that have also affected people's sort of mental health and the way they're feeling about things, people feeling much more isolated. So all of that, I think, has contributed to a very different dynamic. And then the other thing that we've had is the Great Resignation, and people kind of, through the whole period of being furloughed or things being different in their working environments, thinking, well, actually, I don't have to do what I was doing before. I don't have to be working really long hours. I don't have to be doing all these commutes, or I don't actually want to earn as much money as I used to, because I realised that the balance that I had prior to COVID was not as good as the balance that I have now, even though I'm earning less. So, change brings up a whole host of things to people, and people think, oh, I'm not going to go back to my job. So now we have employers needing to be thinking about how are they going to retain people, how are they going to recruit the people who have left and replace them. And then we've also got the fact that people can now work, not everywhere, but a lot of people can work in any potential location. We've got lots of people now who previously had to work, say, based in London. Now they can work in different parts of the country. They can even work outside the country. So again, they're having to think about how are they competing. If I'm a North Devon-based employer and I'm recruiting a North Devon pool of people, that's fine. But now my North Devon pool of people can potentially get a job in London and work from home and go up once a quarter. So now I'm competing with different salaries. So the whole kind of landscape has changed, which means employers are really having, even SMEs right down to the smallest ones, are having to think about how do they look after their employees' well-being, keep them wanting to work for them, and attract new employees who want to work for them.
There's so much in what you've said there, and it's great to hear that you're noticing a difference in terms of people being more focused about well-being and bringing that towards the forefront, and that's not just a COVID thing. What do you think the deep sort of rooted motivation for that, besides just it's a trendy thing to do, or I'm being pressured by media, or what I suppose what's the deep motivation, but also what's a long lasting motivation to do it? What, from your perspective?
Well, I'm sure that for many of the organisations who are contacting us, it comes from a good place, a sense of we want to do right by our employees and we want them to be happy working for us. But there is undoubtedly a wider business need there in terms of profit. So there's always going to be the bottom line, and how are we profitable as an organisation? And I think that if we care about our employees' well-being, then they will be more productive because they're happier at work. So, and productivity will impact on the bottom line. They'll hopefully be more engaged. And the great thing about engagement is that we get discretionary effort. So it's very difficult to get discretionary effort from employees unless they're truly engaged. And well-being doesn't necessarily bring engagement, but it is a piece of that puzzle. So if we have greater employee well-being, we have greater engagement, we now have employees who are giving us more than we are asking them to give us. And most SMEs spend most of their days trying to solve problems. And we often hear this from our clients. They say, we're the only ones who care about solving problems. How do we get the rest of our staff to care about solving problems? Well, they will do that through discretionary effort, and will want to care about solving the problems when they're fully engaged. So well-being just takes you on that journey towards all of your employees being part of resolving the issues that are coming up every day. So I think that's sort of key in terms of that sort of productivity piece. But then we've also got retention, and retention is just so important at the moment. And SMEs feel the loss of a good employee much more quickly than a large organisation does. So, I mean, like for example, we're tiny compared to some SMEs, but we have just over 20 employees. And if we lose one employee, that impacts on our productivity very, very quickly. And it impacts on our service delivery because, well, we're all HR consultants. We've got one person down, all that has to be absorbed by the team to look after a client. It also impacts on the rest of the team's well-being because they're all having to do more until you can recruit. And recruitment in the current market is tough. It takes a long time to fill those roles. And then, of course, when you have filled them, there's all the time it takes to get that person back up and running. So I think that they're they are the drivers that employers are recognising, that it's not now just about getting bums on seats or people with legs and arms, or whatever we used to say. Now it's about actually we need to somewhat convince people to come and work for us and stay working for us. And most of us just want to feel good in what we do. And if we're at work a lot, so if we want to feel good, we're going to look to our employers to put some initiatives in place to help that.
So there's huge benefits of focusing on well-being. You talked about obviously productivity, retention, and ultimately that drives our profits, which is obviously what businesses are there to make, sustainable profits.
Yeah.
How would you define well-being? Because I mean, it's quite a, I mean, it's a big old thing to probably define. We have a dog barking, which I might just.
Sorry.
It's all right. I will just carry on talking, and I will cut this out at some point.
Unfortunately, the postman has knocked on the door, and so she has to tell everyone.
Do you need to go off, and would that help, or as in wander off and come back?
I think it stopped.
We okay now? No.
I think until the postman goes, she's going to keep barking. I'm really sorry.
Don't worry about this. It's fine. I'll cut this out so it'll be seamless on the podcast.
He's gone now.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. I'll come back to ask your question. So how would you define well-being in that? It's like a broad thing, and people have different definitions. I'd like to understand how you see well-being.
So I wrote this down before because I was sort of like, what is the definition of employee well-being? And this is how I define it. So I define it as the overall mental, physical, emotional, and economic health of your employees. So it's that kind of, someone's talking about that wheel, the balance of, the wheel of life, the balance. It's about those 4 quadrants. And we as employers aren't responsible for all of it for our employees, but we can contribute to it. And people spend a lot of time at work. So the more we can contribute to benefiting and improving those 4 quadrants, I think the better.
And what in terms of responsibility, because you said that it's not totally the responsibility of the employee. Is there an employer responsibility with well-being as well, do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, as with everything in life, we all have individual responsibilities for ourselves and how we take care of ourselves and look after ourselves. And employers have, I think employers just have a responsibility for not making things worse for a start. So there's lots of things we can do to make things worse. We can have poor working practices, policies and procedures that don't support people properly. we could have cultures of bullying and harassment, cultures that aren't inclusive. We can, as managers, not speak to our employees or not ask them how they're doing or how they're feeling about things. We can not care about their development. There's just a million and one things that we can do at work in our cultures that make things worse for employees. And then we can just be standstill. We can be good enough employers, not make things worse, and have a working place that is just good enough and people feel okay coming to work. And then we can just be better. And if we can do the better things, and there's lots of strategies that we can put in place. So sort of turning that initial list on its head, we have things like, training our managers and making sure that they know how to have difficult conversations with employees and know to do regular meetings with them, performance management conversations, talk about their development and where do they want to go, their careers, understand what's going on for them in their personal lives, because understanding means that you can give support. And we can also train managers and train staff in what are acceptable practices at workplace in terms of bullying, harassment, behaviours that are contradictory to what we actually want to be achieving. And so there's just many things that we can be doing. We can be looking at our benefits packages and what could we do with those to help employees, even really small employers. And it may be one thing a year. We sort of done that at Fitzgerald HR because we've obviously grown from being tiny to where we are now. And initially we decided that what we could afford to do was offer a lot of holiday. So we offered much more holiday than the statutory, because one of our sort of strong values is about work-life balance and people having the time to do important things with their families and friends and loved ones and their hobbies, etc. So that was all we could afford to do initially. But as we've grown, we've been able to introduce other things like higher employer pension contributions and employee assistance programs and things like that. They're not very expensive, but they make a big difference to employees. So I kind of think in answer to your original question, we're all responsible, but it's worth it as employers that we take responsibility for what we can do and the differences we can make, because obviously it impacts on that ultimate bottom line.
Yeah, and it does, and it's interesting on well-being. I think it can be quite an overwhelming topic or an area for an SME to explore and understand. Where do they start, how they go about it, what things they need to do. I've got to do this, got to do that, and you just mentioned something about training managers, benefits, and they're just some aspects.
Yeah.
If you were an SME and you're an SME yourself, how do you get, I guess, well-being at the sort of at the heart of the company, but also, I guess, creating a culture of well-being? Because I guess that makes it important. It makes it more of a thing that will continue, be more sustainable, as opposed to doing. Yes, giving people more holidays is a real benefit, but it's come from a sense of who you are as an individual or as a business. So how do we get well-being at the center of an organization, that it's a thing they're thinking about and developing as they go forward?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I feel quite passionate about this, and I think it's about where does the people agenda sit in a business, and often what I find is you go into the large organizations, the corporates, etc., and there's nearly always someone at sort of board level who is a sort of HR director or representing HR. And as you get down into the SMEs, that's hardly ever so. And I understand why it's not so, because it's a cost that a lot of SMEs can't afford. And I don't think it's necessary that it's somebody who is a HR professional, but you're always going to see on that leadership team someone responsible for finance, someone responsible for customer services, and depending on the size, the smaller you are, sometimes someone's responsible for more than one of these. But the bigger they get, you've normally got your sales and marketing, your finance and your customer services, and rarely is there someone championing the people agenda. And I really think that it is as simple as identifying who of those will champion the people agenda. It's not about saying we have to recruit HR director or singing or dancing who comes in and does that. That's rarely cost effective. But once somebody cares about it and is championing it, it makes all the difference for bringing that forward. And we work with loads of employers who do that. So they've got someone who champions it, and we'll help them. So we'll be, they don't necessarily know how to put together a wellbeing strategy or what that should look like, but we can give them the advice and guidance. So and there's lots out there as well. You can go on to, you can Google it, and there'll be loads of information and loads of strategies and stuff that you can take forward. But what we always say to our clients is to start with your people, because well-being is about them. What do they think you need? And this is where you need to make sure you've got an employee voice in the organization, because if you haven't really thought about it, you may not have an employee voice. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. And the most effective employee voice is by having lots and lots of channels. So just to give you an example of what we do, we have a sort of meeting rhythm in the organization, and one part of it is individual. So we have weekly individual meets, managers with staff, which also is followed up by quarterly, and that's supported by sort of annual review. So there's opportunities throughout that, and there's a different focus in each of those meetings, but there's opportunities throughout that for employees to have a voice and say how they're feeling, and managers to actually show that they care. And then we've also got the company agenda. So we have, again, a company meeting, a quarterly company meeting, and weekly company meetings, which are the whole teams. So again, there's an opportunity there for the employee voice to come up. We have we use a software platform called We Thrive, which is a pulse engagement survey, and that's really good because it tells us what employees are thinking and feeling, and they can do it anonymously or not. So again, it's kind of like the last two that we ran, September and December, told us that our employees are feeling like they don't have enough headspace. So it's just really easy to then to identify not necessarily a quick win, but we could write a whole wellbeing strategy and implement all sorts of things. But actually, this is the pain point for our employees. They feel like they don't have headspace. So let's just look immediately at how can we give them headspace and create that headspace.
So is that like a software that people type in the responses to various questions that are asked? Is it anonymously, is it, or is it just?
You can do both. You can do both. Okay. Some of our surveys we do anonymously, and some of them we don't, because sometimes it's really helpful if there's an individual employee who's struggling, and we want to hear their voice, and they may not have felt comfortable doing it through any of the other meeting structures. So that's another way.
Brilliant. I like that. Sort of using technology in a way of trying to, I suppose, canvas stuff as you say, on the pulse right now, as in how are people feeling right now, as opposed to waiting a few months to get some feedback from a survey.
Yeah, we do the pulse surveys quarterly, but you can do them even more often if you want to. But we find quarterly is quite sufficient. And what's great about it is you can immediately see what's going wrong, like where are the pain points for our employees? So what are their obstacles? What are their stressors? And how can we remove them? So if giving you the example of headspace, we again talk to your employees, because they're the people who can tell you what can improve it. But what we spoke to them through our sort of company meeting structure, and what they told us was that the workloads are just too high, so they just can't get the headspace. So we're able to look at workloads. How can we distribute them better? Obviously, we're a growing business, so we're always going to be a bit stretched, but there may be other ways that we can do things. And they gave us loads of good ideas. Your employees will be the absolute best people to give you the ideas. So, because this is the thing about strategy, isn't it? It doesn't have to be, in fact, rarely should it be, a big long document that's written and drafted and tucked away in a drawer. It's an ongoing commitment to making change.
And the key thing is, as you say, the answers are in the people. They've highlighted needed some headspace, and then I facilitated sort of groups where you almost like say, well, how do we get that headspace, and use the people in the organization to come up with the answers. Because I think sometimes leaders and owners feel they have to know the answers to everything, but actually you can just ask some questions, some simple questions that can galvanize, to create and canvas all that information. And actually that creates engagement, contribution, and that as another positive things to well-being, because people feel they're listened to as well and valued. And suddenly you've got this people that are really owning this organization and contributing and making some real impact with it as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because control is a big factor in well-being. If we feel out of control in any aspect of our lives, that affects our well-being. So for employees to feel asked about things and their voice to be heard, and that makes them feel in control in their jobs, and helps them then to feel more engaged, and like you say, improve their well-being.
I really like the having somebody to champion the people. I think it's, I work with organizations like yourself, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, which, I always say, get to a place where you've got a people strategy of some form, whatever that may be. But it might be owned by the MD, it might be owned by somebody else, but somebody is championing it. And doesn't mean they're an expert, but there's a focus on the business. So for that person who is championing that sort of people aspect of the business, what are two things that they need to think about if they were to think about a well-being strategy? And I appreciate you can't say that in a few minutes, but some things to think through and to give somebody some direction of what's important in building a well-being strategy. I mean, you've said some things already, but what else would you say on that?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to those 4 quadrants. I'd almost start with that. So you've got your kind of your physical, emotional, financial, and social. So that's where I begin. I would say, right, we've got these 4 things. What can we do in each of these 4 things to improve the well-being of our employees? We'd then be starting to look at how you're getting their voice and understanding what they're telling you that they're looking for and needing. And you're probably going to know as well, you're going to have a sense of what are the pain points in the organisation and where are the most frustrations. So that's where I begin. And then it's all going to depend on your size and what kind of sort of, I guess, budget that you have, time and resources. But there's quick wins. There's things like EAPs, which aren't very expensive, and an EAP, for anyone who doesn't know, is an employee assistance program. So that's generally like a helpline that you can call, and you normally get a number of counselling sessions, and you can get help with your finances, and also sort of general life coach. So they often don't cost much more for an SME than sort of £1,000, £2,000 a year or something like that. So it can be quite a quick win and give people a place to go. I mean, wellbeing is not just about an EAP, but what I'm saying is I might look at quick wins, like what things could we do quickly, because there will be other things that are more embedded into the organisation that will take longer to change, and that will be potentially around your culture, your managers being upskilled in understanding well-being and understanding how to support their employees, and also your policies and procedures, and making sure that they're not just documents that somebody wrote at some time, but actually they are being used effectively to build the culture that you want.
Okay, that's some great little pointers there. Great direction for somebody who's starting out on this or needs a bit of a refresh on how to go about it, because I think there's so much out there. That's really helpful. Thank you for your time today, Lucy. I've really appreciated it, really enjoyed and your insights you've shared. Thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you and connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
So you can go to our website, which is fitzgeraldhr.co.uk. So lots of information on there, and we've got loads of resources. We've got a knowledge library on there, and we have even got a guide on I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I think it's called how to draft a wellbeing strategy or employee wellbeing strategy. So you can find that on our
I'll put that into the show notes as well. I'll get a link from your website and put it into the show notes as well.
Yeah, good. That would be great. And then obviously just find me on LinkedIn, because it would be great to connect.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today, Lucy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too, Julian. Thank you for having me.